Hi guys, welcome to Learning Electronics Repair. I have some little PCBs here. I was given these by Detlef, who wants to program some of these little 18 mega processors here. These are for a project that we're working on. He wants to make sure they are not fake and will program after having some fake processors. MCUs of a different type recently. So he ordered some of these little boards. The idea is we solder the chip onto these and then he can program them. I'm sure there are some clips or something you could buy like that would hold these, a sort of a zero insertion force type thing, but he doesn't have any and these were very cheap and he likes giving me stuff to do basically, so we're going to do it this way. Which brought me around to thinking that I haven't done any videos on this type of soldering yet. I've done QFN and a few other things, HDMI, USB sockets. So let's have a look at these. So these are not too difficult to solder. You'll see the board has two sides. Yeah, this is for a different size chip. So this is for a 0.65mm. If we get hold of one of these things, you'll see it doesn't fit on this side. It does fit on this side, so this is the correct pitch for this chip, which was now stuck to my solder tweezers, of course. Yeah, getting stuck to the soldering tweezers is the most common problem with these sort of chips. So this wants to go on here. Now, these chips don't have a pad underneath them, okay? Some chips do. I have seen these type of chips, which are called quad flat with pins, QFP chips. Okay, I have seen some of these. If we can just turn one over, that do have a pad underneath. These don't. So the method you're going to use for soldering them in particular will actually depend on whether they have the pad underneath them or not. That pad generally connects to ground and must be soldered for the chip to work. So the method I would use would vary depending on whether there's a pad underneath or not. These boards have a hole, several holes through the board under the pad. If you're designing your own PCBs, do it this way, because then you can solder the chip either way with a soldering iron or with hot air, and you can actually drop some solder in from the other side once you've soldered the pins and soldered the pad as well. Okay, so that's a very useful thing to do if you're actually designing your PCBs, but if you're repairing stuff, you don't have that option. If it doesn't have those, then we have to solder this with hot air. Okay, so I'm going to do this three ways, or two and a half ways, shall we say. So one way is I'm going to use my soldering iron, the one I normally use for just about everything, this big chunky BC3 on this T12 handle. Okay, so I'm going to use that. This is my weapon of choice when it comes to soldering. I'm just going to show you that you don't need a fine tip soldering iron to do this, but as a proof of that, I'm also going to use this. So this is a C210, a very fine tip soldering iron, but it's quite a powerful one, so we'll try that as well. And then lastly, we'll do this using hot air. And then guys, do it whichever way works best for you, or if you find some other methods, A, let us all know below, and B, use it, because if it works for you, that's what you should be doing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to use a soldering iron tip I'm used to using, the big chunky one, and we're going to solder this onto here. Using the soldering iron and solder, I can either use this one, this is the one I normally use, upside down, you see there, but this HXT 100, that's a 0.6mm. I also have this one. This is this TYV866 upside down again, so let's turn it around. This is a 0.2mm, and you can actually get this one in 0.2mm as well. I've not tried it, but these are supposedly the same brand, but you know, these are coming from AliExpress, so who knows. But these work very well. They're both 63% tin, 37% lead, and that's flux. Okay, this one again, actually 6337 and flux. Okay, But although the solder has flux in, I'm going to add some flux. This is the one I use. Get us up this way around, NC559ASM. Again, this comes from AliExpress. Expiry date is well out of date. These things don't expire. They continue to work until they run out, basically. Okay. I'm going to add some flux to start with. It makes this much easier. And the technique I'm going to use with this, I'm just going to put a bit of flux in some corners. I'm going to solder this down by tagging a couple of the corners to the board first, okay? So you can position the chip and you can hold it in place while you tag the corner on so it's fixed down at 2 points. Or you could use the technique of putting a bit of leaded solder on the pad and kind of sliding the chip into where the solder is. Let's do it by just tagging the corner down first, okay? So I'm just going to make sure that the chip is actually sitting fairly straight. I can adjust it slightly once it's tagged down, so it doesn't have to be exact. I can move it a little bit, okay? As long as the pins are on the pads and they not bridging between two, I wouldn't suggest being just too anal about this. Yeah, just do it. Yeah, as long as it works and it looks tidy enough, I think that's fine. That's my personal choice. I find generally by fiddling around too much, you often come to a point where you wish you'd left it alone in the first place. So I'm going to add some solder. This is the 0.6mm onto the tip, just a small amount. I'm now going to hold the chip in place. I'm going to try this holding the chip left-handed and soldering right-handed. I am right-handed. Okay, you'll see I moved it a bit back, and actually once I've got hold of it like this, pushing down, I can position it as well. Even with my left hand, if you find it's moving around a lot, just try to hold it flat like so, okay? Again, if it's sliding around, and they will do this, especially if you haven't had much practice, just kind of like use something else just to position it back in place. Okay, I used 2 pairs of tweezers, so I was happy. And I'm going to try and solder this pin. So I should have enough solder to do that without adding any more. Okay, that's reasonably straight. It's not quite. I might be able to just move that a little bit. See there, I can actually just move it very slightly without breaking the pin or the pad. If you can't get it to line up, just resolder it again. Don't worry about it, just unsolder it and do it again. I actually want to move that slightly towards the left. Let's see if I can do it. So again, you see I'm moving that. You'll eventually reach the point where you wish you'd left it alone. Okay, that's going to line up just fine there, yeah. So we try to get this corner. I may have to add a little bit more solder now, but there's in fact enough. Okay, so you can see now I've actually tagged that down by 2 pins, corners. Just get it flat a little bit. That's got the leg. Okay. Now that isn't really going to go anywhere. So what I can do now is add more flux, and this is what allows you to do this. I'm going to just try and get a couple more corners. Okay, you can see the corners, they're quite easy to go for. Okay. Again, just a little bit of solder on the tip. That's all I need. Yeah. You see the flux is just causing the solder to flow where I want it to go. It's been very well behaved. I haven't added any more solder yet. I have enough to do several pins. Okay. I'll come to the point where I have to add a little bit more. Yeah, I'm getting there now, so just a tiny little touch again. Okay. Pin. That pin. Okay, so this is definitely not going to go anywhere. Now I'm going to drag the soldering iron across the whole side. So you see, I've put flux on there. Okay. Once more, a little bit of solder. A little bit more this time. And I can now just put the soldering iron flat on it here. And just solder the pins. See? You see what it's doing? It's just taking the solder nicely up to the pins. I can use this edge loop. Okay. If you get a solder bridge like that, you have a little bit too much solder, so wipe all the solder off and go again. If it won't come off, just use a bit of braid. But often by just wiping the tip. Yeah. You can try to let gravity help you a little bit. So clearly I have too much solder on this, yeah. We'll wipe the tip. See, it's got it now. I can clean the rest of the solder off by using that to solder something else. Yeah, you see there? Come back in here. I've took some more solder off there. Yeah. A little bit more. Without flux, you wouldn't be able to do this. Okay. Yeah. You see how I've used the solder from there to solder that side? Again, just a little bit too much there. I'll go along these ones. Again, I can come back to this bit, take it from there, put it here, put it here, okay. There's still enough on the tip, it's fine. Now I'm running a bit short of it, get some from there. Okay. I'm not happy that one's quite soldered, so I'll just add a tiny bit more. Little spot. Yeah. And I think they're all soldered. That's cleaned up with a bit of isopropyl alcohol. Of course, at this point, you did remember to orient the dot with the chamfered edge here. Yeah, you did get it the right way round, I hope. Let's put this under the microscope now. And there it is. So we can see that the chip is nicely soldered. There's no solder bridges. All the pins are actually soldered down. Okay. And we used almost no solder on that. You saw the very slight amounts I was adding. And when I found the bridging, I was just effectively cleaning the soldering iron tip, taking a bit of solder from the bridge and putting it on the other pins, okay? So that's done with the chunky soldering iron tip. Now let's try the same with a fine tip. And let's see if it's easier, more difficult, or maybe just down to personal experience, I work better with this one. Let's see. I'm going to do this using the soldering iron right-handed again. Same sort of technique, bit of flux on two ends of it, two corners. You might find that using a tool like this is better for holding the thing flat, okay? But before we do that, I once again need both hands because I want to add some solder to the soldering iron. I'll show you the temperatures and everything when we finish so you can see what I have the soldering iron set to. Okay, and I'll show you the stations, you know what I'm using. So this one first, we're going to come in with a bit of solder on the tip. Okay, I'm going to take this and hold it. So I'm going to push flat on it. And look, now I can kind of like just slide that around so I get it where I want it, and then fine soldering tip. So I've got one pin that's nice and square, probably better than the other one actually. We'll come in with the bit of solder again. So I'm just going to give the tip a quick clean. And once I've got one corner tagged down, this shouldn't really go anywhere, it should stay still. Okay, so again we have two corners. I normally, as you saw before, like to get all four corners before we solder the rest. Okay, so I'll get at least one of those, at least one of these two, if not both. Okay. Once again, soldering tip, fine tip, solder. Now you'll see this doesn't hold the solder, it doesn't carry the solder like that bigger tip did. You know, I was actually kind of like moving around blobs of solder with it. You can't do that with this, it won't hold the solder. There's probably tips you could use. So again, a bit of this. Okay, and we come in that way. Okay, may not have that one, but there's solder on there. And we'll do this one and then we will try and solder the rest. Okay, right, so flux all around it, same as before. Okay, so we drag the soldering iron across. That's the idea of this bent conical tip. Now, I hope you can see straight away, this is not going as easily as the one I used before. Okay, I have a solder bridge. Let's come across there, back to here, back to here. Let's try and drag that bridge along. There's plenty of solder on there. I'm going to wipe some solder off. Okay. I hope you can see this isn't working as well as the other one did. Let's try moving a bit of the solder around, but we'll try this way. Okay, can you see that, guys? I can get in there, but I can't get the solder out. Again. And we're making the right pig's ear of it, yeah. Now, that may just be me, but I'll take the big chunky iron and let's see what happens. Okay. Both irons are at the same temperature, by the way, 380 centigrade. So once again, in with this one. Look. Okay. Whack the tip. Again. Okay, it's not coming off, so down here. Okay, come back to it. So I'm using that as like a little reservoir of solder, basically. And could you see I couldn't do that with the fine tip? Yeah. Now, I'm not saying there aren't other tips I could possibly use with that C210, and if you guys recommend any particular tip to use with it, I will come back and do this again using your recommendation. Okay. Yeah. Let's vary it around a bit. Let's try some of the 0.2mm solder. Okay. Singe the outside of my finger there. On video, first time I've ever done it. In over 3 years of the channel. So I've been doing rather well there. Okay. I think we're all soldered. There's the odd pin that has more than the others, but I think we're all soldered. Let's clean that up and have a look. Once again, it's soldered, but that is not as good as the first one. And the side which is bad is the side where I was struggling with that fine tip. Okay. I mean, sure, we can clean this bit of stuff off here and it's scratched here and there, but that is not as good. Okay. Electrically, it will be fine, but it's not as good a job. So, can we do this with hot air? Yeah. I'm sure we can do it with hot air, but is it going to be any better or easier? Okay, so to do this, I'll add flux. I'm going to add some solder to all the pins. I'll use my preferred soldering iron. Okay, I'm going to try and get an even amount of solder across all the pads. Yeah, fairly even that. I want enough solder to actually give the chip something to stick to, basically. Okay. I think we might have a... No, it's not a bridge, it's just a reflection. Okay. So there's our PCB prepared with a bit of solder on. If I was soldering a QFN or a QFP with a pad underneath, I would also put the same amount of solder on there. Once again, QFP, quad flat pins. QFN, quad flat no pins. That's the difference. I'm actually gonna not do this and line this up like so. I'm gonna warm the board up a bit first. I'll get the solder close to melting. Again, I'll show you the settings afterwards that I'm using. I'm gonna use the hot air in my left hand because I am right-handed. And I'm going to position the chip using my right hand, which is the same one I was using for the soldering iron. Okay, so let's just get some nice and warm. Okay, we'll bring the chip in now, it's getting quite warm that. Hold it in position. Okay, and then try and solder it. I can see the solder's melted, so I'm just going to hold this still and let the solder solidify. Okay, and that's soldered. Again, let's clean that up and let's have a look. And once again, that one is nicely soldered. Okay, looks good to me. Let's alter the focus a bit. Yeah, that is nicely soldered. Probably, to be honest, looks better than the other two. So that's that one. This is the one where I tried the fine tip and then went on to the large tip. It has more solder on the pins, but I wouldn't say it was any particularly better soldered. Okay, and then the original one I did with just the large tip, which probably has the most solder on the pins, but I'd say this one is still well soldered. Okay, so hot air was the fastest method, without a doubt. I actually think that one gives the better looking result, the one I would trust the most. And this method with the fine tip just didn't work. You see, I just gave up and went on to the large tip. So that's how to do it. That's 3 ways to do it. I'd hope you would agree with me that only 2 ways are really successful. So again, if you struggle to solder this type of thing, you're possibly using the wrong equipment. Other than that, it's just a little bit of practice. So, used in this video. The Q861DW hot air station. This is set to full airflow, 450 degrees centigrade. Okay. This is the T12 set at 380. Normally that just sits on top of there like so. That has a BC3 tip. Okay, this is the handle. This handle is called 9502, by the way, this style of handle. BC3 tip, and the great thing with this is you can hold it really close to the tip so you don't get so much movement on the tip if your hand is shaking slightly and the ball shakes slightly. Okay, and then the last method I used, or rather the second soldering method, was this one. So this is a Sugon T26D. This is the C210. I used a bent conical tip with that one. I also have a couple of these blade or knife type tips. I can use them for that type of soldering, but I don't think they work as well as that T12 does. The other ones, by the way, these are the same as that T12, pretty much BC3 style. These are C245 type tips, and one of the projects I'm going to be building hopefully next month is a station that will run these. I already have a handle for these, which is this one. So this is a C245 handle. Unfortunately, the T26D station doesn't work with it. This should be even more powerful than that one, so I'm looking forward to trying this. I'm building my own station for it. Okay, so just to sum up then, you saw what works for me. I'm sure that would work for you, but it doesn't mean that you don't know a better method. Okay, so your method, please, down there, let us know. And when I get the C245, plus any suggestions you guys have made for a better way to do this, let's do this again. Yeah, or something very similar. Let's try again and see if we can find any better ways. But for now, guys, I'm going to say that's the way to solder QFP. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Look forward to seeing you all soon again on Learn Electronics Repair. Ciao for now, guys.